Welcome to the English with Kirsty podcast from www.englishwithkirsty.com. Here I'll be sharing with you tips, information and other learning resources so that you can improve your business English. Hi everyone and welcome to the English with Kirsty podcast. Today we have a returning guest. Welcome back, Jennifer.
Thank you, Kirsty. It's lovely to be back.
Yeah, I've asked Jennifer to come back because I was reading one of her newsletters and then as a result of that reading one of her blog posts, and I thought that this would be a really good topic for us because it's something that I'm always talking about as well. So I thought it would be nice to have a discussion about that, and I will link the blog post into this episode's show notes page. But let's start by going back to the beginning. So let's find out who you are, Jennifer, because I know some people haven't heard our first interview. It was a while ago now. So who are you and what do you do?
I am Dr. Jennifer Jones and I'm a writing coach. I trained to teach writing 25 years ago during my PhD, and I've been teaching it in one way or another ever since. Now, most of my work is helping small business owners with the writing they need to do in their business. And that ranges from everything from planning your social media posts to writing your expert books.
Okay, so and as part of that, you have a blog, and the post that I was referring to previously was the one about how it's important for us to show up as ourselves. Why did you feel inspired or feel the need to write this particular post?
I was thinking back to the week I wrote that. I'd been to several networking meetings and had lots of conversations with people who just felt like their voice wasn't good enough. And I know that a lot of us are told at school that we can't write. I was told at school that I couldn't write.
Wow.
And now a lot of people who worry that they can't write are asking AI to write for them, and that doesn't help your credibility. Because if somebody reads a post that AI wrote for you, and that's one voice, and then they talk to you and that's a different voice, they'll sense that they're not the same, and then they're not going to trust the person they're talking to. So you end up losing trust where you don't need to if you just write in your own voice.
Yeah, I think it's like a silent loss of trust, isn't it? People aren't going to say, "Oh, well, I don't trust you anymore because I saw this post and it looks like AI." I mean, that's another problem that people can switch off before they even find out what your voice is like because they have the impression that a post was written by AI, and you think, "Oh, there's enough of that online. I want to find some real people." But even if they get to the point where they have a conversation with you, it could just be that that conversation doesn't go anywhere. Is people are not necessarily going to say, I see inconsistency here. You just won't get the leads or the sales or whatever you're looking for. It's so you
Yeah.
can be losing trust without anyone ever telling you. It's just that you're not making the connections that you could be.
Yeah. Most of your audience won't consciously know that the reason they don't trust you is that you sounded different on the page. But that'll be why, or that'll be a lot of why they don't trust what you're saying, because you just don't sound like who they thought you were.
Mm. So the name of this article, it says, want to connect with your audience, use your voice. So that's going back to this idea that um, your voice is going to set you apart from everyone else, even people in the same area, people doing the same thing. Um, What do you think are so we've talked about this danger where the loss of trust. Do you think there are other dangers of people using generative AI to write for them, as in write the whole thing, just not have any input? Apart from the loss of trust, what else can this do? How else can this do damage to your credibility or your business?
Well, if AI doesn't have an answer to a question, it makes one up. And AI doesn't know how you run your business. So it might tell people to expect something from you that you don't actually provide.
Mm.
And if you don't take the time to go through it very carefully and think about what it has produced to make sure that it does actually say what you do, then you could end up being guilty of, I guess, false advertising, saying that you do something that you don't. So there's a very big risk there that you're just going to create expectations that you can't fulfill.
And you won't remember having said this thing probably if you didn't check it. You know, I'd never said that, but actually you may have done if you didn't check the output before it went online.
Yeah. And the time it takes to go through and check that everything AI said is true, and to a lot of people tell me that they humanize the voice and make it sound like them. I'm a trained editor. I don't edit stuff that's been created by AI because it takes a lot longer to make a computer sound human than it does to fix a human's errors. And if I know that they don't have the training to do that well, so they're spending a lot of time trying to rewrite what AI wrote and check that what AI wrote was true. And if they just put that time into writing it themselves, they're going to present their business in a better light, and prevent all of these problems from happening.
Yeah, I think that is a lot of the people are saying to use AI for certain tasks because it saves time, and in some cases it does. I'm not convinced that it does with writing, but like, okay, there are some situations in which using AI can save us time. But apart from the time concern, what do you think people's biggest fears are about actually using their own voice and being vulnerable enough to do that?
Well, it's that it does feel vulnerable, and a lot of it is goes back to what the education system does to us. At school, most of us are taught to write in the hardest way possible, which is for exams. Uh,
Mm.
and a lot of us, whenever we sit down to write, I still occasionally, if I'm stressed about something, will catch myself going back into sort of exam anxiety over writing a particular thing. And that's because that's where we got most of our writing instruction, was how to write for assessment. You're not at school anymore. So you get to write the easy way. And the easy way is to write a messy first draft where you throw all of your ideas on the page, and then you go back and clean it up because you have time to do that. But we're taught to write for exams where your first draft is your only draft. And whenever you write that way, it takes a long time to get everything perfect to begin with. But it doesn't take so long if you just write a messy draft and then go through the steps for cleaning it up.
Because
And
it's
I
easier
think,
to do that than to have like a blank screen or a blank page and then just stare at it and hope something will appear. It's easier to work with something once you've got something there.
yeah, there's a quotation that I've never been able to track down who actually said it, that I can edit a bad page, I can't edit a blank page. And
Mm.
I've seen it attributed to Danielle Steele and Stephen King and probably every other best-selling author out there. It doesn't really matter who said it because it is true. And you do just need to get the words out and then figure out what you're going to do with them. And people don't trust that they can do that. But your clients aren't interested in you sounding like a grammar book. They're interested in you sounding like you. So you don't need to have everything in exactly the right place. You just need to get the point across.
And this is equally true if you're working in an additional language. I'm saying this both as somebody who works to support people who are using English as an additional language, but also as myself, because I use at least one of my other languages professionally, and the plan is to use more. But this is always one of my big concerns, and I think there's a difference. I have used AI to highlight any issues that or errors that I've made that are actual errors, like if I've misgendered a noun and then it's going to affect the adjective and then it's going to affect something like I'm happy to take that kind of feedback because I can also check whether it's right. So I don't accept any suggestions for language that I wouldn't use, but I do find like as a checking for typos and errors type tool, it can have a place. But in terms of people who um, would like to use some of these tools because they are concerned about their credibility if they make mistakes. I guess the same applies, doesn't it? Like always do your better to do better, always do your best to do better, but it's the customers or the potential customers aren't waiting for a perfect version of you. They want a real version of you.
Yeah, and on the point of the language just needing to get the point across, whatever language you're speaking, and I can't remember his first name. Wittgenstein, the philosopher, argued that the purpose of language is to communicate. So it's not to communicate in perfectly formed and perfectly edited sentences. It's to get one idea from one person into another person's head, and that's what your clients want. They're not wanting the perfectly polished version.
In fact, someone said to me the other day, she said, if you make a mistake in German, I saw it, I can see it wasn't written by AI, and that gives it some kind of authenticity. And I would prefer not to make mistakes, but it kind of amused me that we've got to this because it shows that it was a real person that did it because yeah, it doesn't sound so polished but lifeless. It was a real person that wrote it.
Yeah. And with the trying to guess how to make your writing look human, every time we come up with a way of doing that, AI learns it, and then we have to find a new way. So
Mm,
you just need to write the way you speak. And some AI checkers, because I have put text that I've written into AI checkers just to see if they're any good at picking it up. And it can be a text that I typed directly into the AI checker, and it'll still tell me 20% of it was AI
wow.
generated. So we're not going to get to a point that we can know for sure what was written by AI and what wasn't because AI is learning from our writing. The problem is that AI doesn't differentiate between writing of different qualities. So it's looking at, say, everything that's been written on a topic
Mm,
and finding patterns in that, and then it just spits out the next word in the pattern. And the problem with that is that if it looks at everything, it's looking at all the rubbish stuff on the internet too.
yeah.
And if we spend enough time on the internet, you know, there's a lot of it that you don't want to sound like.
Mm.
So
Even
it's
on LinkedIn, there's a lot that I don't want to sound like just a site like LinkedIn, but yeah, okay. But it's true. It's not filtering out what is better. But even for us, I mean, I know that because I started around 15 years ago, I know that for me there was a transition period because previously I'd been working for a large organization and I was writing for the organization. And so for me to go from that to writing my own copy was hard in a way. It was like it felt very vulnerable. It should have been easier because it was my voice and I wasn't trying to do this corporate voice, but at the same time, because I hadn't been doing it very long at the time, then it's a process, isn't it? Discovering your own voice can can take a bit of work before you really feel that you're writing as you speak or as you really communicate, not as you're in quotes supposed to be communicating. What advice would you give to people who want to develop their voice or discover their voice even, to really get to know how they want to communicate with people?
first figure out who you're writing to, and that needs to be one person. Yes, you want more than one person to read it, but if you write to one person, you will write as though you're talking to a person and not to a group.
Mm,
If you try to communicate to everybody, you'll end up watering it down so much that you don't end up saying anything. Or if you talk to a person, even if it's somebody wildly different from that person, they'll still hear you as human. The best example from my coaching that I have of that is when my first book client wrote her book for a 43-year-old mom who lived in Portsmouth and started her business after her three kids had started school. And she sent the draft to her cover designer, who was a 20-something-year-old man in Germany who had no kids. And he had planned to just skim the first few pages to get a feel for it and then produce some sample covers. And he texted her to say, I'm going to need another day because I stayed up all night to finish your book. As it felt like she was talking to him, even though she was writing it to this
wow.
43-year-old woman. So it does work to write to one person. The other advice is to make your outline in such a way that it invites you to treat the text like a conversation on the page. And what I mean by that is you start by stating your main point in one sentence. That's what I call your statement of argument. And then you list all of the questions you're going to need to answer to convince your reader that your statement of argument is true. And then you go through the questions and you decide which ones you actually want to answer, because this is your piece. You don't have to answer all of them. Cross out the ones you don't want to deal with. Put the remaining questions in a logical order. And then as you're writing your first draft, you're just answering the next question. And everyone in small business, if you've been in business long enough to be able to articulate what you do, so everyone who's been in business for at least a few weeks can talk and answer questions about what they do. There's no reason to make writing about your business any harder than that. And if you write, and you don't always have to include the question in the text you publish, but if you write in response to the question, you will end up writing in a more conversational tone. And that's the secret, insofar as it is one. I've been publishing about this a lot. It's not one anymore, but that is the secret to making your writing sound like you're talking to your reader.
And I guess actually it doesn't do any harm, depending on the piece, to include those questions, because then it breaks up the wall of text. If it's for a blog post or something, it might even be helpful for SEO to have the questions and then answer format. I mean, not every time maybe, because that could become tedious, but um, do you think that makes it easier to read if you do include them sometimes, or do you always advise people to remove them?
No, you do need at least a subheading, and where you change from one question to the next in a blog post is an excellent signal that you do need another subheading. If you look through my blogs, you can see that sometimes I leave the question, and if my subheading is a question, then that came directly from my outline. And sometimes I change it. Whether I change it or not depends often on whether the way I phrased the question is how the question gets asked on Google. Because if you put a search term in, then Google, if you scroll down the page, there's a section called People Also Ask.
Mm.
And if you happen upon something that's similar to one of those, then you know people are going to be searching for it.
Okay, so if people are looking for a good title even, or some inspiration at least for how they could, because sometimes that's the hardest part. You've got the thing written, and then what do you call it?
Well, and
So
having the questions or the subheadings, if you end up changing them into something other than a question, interspersed throughout the text, helps your human reader navigate the text, but it also tells the search engines how it's
mm,
structured, what it's about, and what questions or queries it can answer.
yeah, and that's important as well um for being discovered, for the text being found.
Yeah.
And going back to something you said earlier, this sometimes we just have this obsession with things being right rather than communicating. And I think one of the reasons people sometimes use AI instead of their own voice is because they want to outsource that worrying about whether or not something is right. If somebody has decided that they are going to write it themselves and they're going to use their voice, and they get the text written, do you have any advice? Because this is something that came up in another episode. Do you have any advice for how to know when it's done, like to stop over checking, to stop wasting time on, like, you've edited it, it's finished, but then people keep going back and changing something again, and
Um,
how do we break this behavior pattern?
I do have advice on how to do your own editing. Before I explain that, there is a famous extreme example of not letting go of a piece. Uh, all of the English speakers on here will have heard of Wordsworth. Many of the speakers of other languages will also have heard of him. Famous poet. He wrote a really long poem called The Prelude. It's the book publication is like an inch and a half thick, big, heavy book. That was supposed to be the prelude to a much longer poem about his development as a poet. But Wordsworth couldn't stop editing the prelude, so he never wrote the much longer version, which I will always be thankful for. I have had to read the whole prelude as a student. Um, But he published the first version of the Prelude in 1805, and then he kept rewriting it and republishing it. And he only stopped rewriting it and republishing it in 1850 because he died.
Ah,
Don't be Wordsworth.
no.
For being more sensible about your self-editing, listening to Word or Google Docs read your draft back to you can be helpful because you will hear errors that you don't always catch reading it. If you're reading with your eyes, that you wouldn't catch reading it that way. I haven't seen any research on this, but I suspect if you had something like if you have a normal screen reader that you use, for those of you who use screen readers, if you have something else read it to you, so at a slightly different speed, you might catch more errors listening to it in a different voice. Or you can try reading it from the last sentence to the first, because you need to make the reading experience different so that your brain doesn't just fill in what you meant to say. And then once you're sure that you don't have any sentences that say don't have a subject doing anything, and once it mostly makes sense, it's probably time to let it go. Making it perfect isn't going to make it better.
Mm.
If you're not letting it go, there's probably something else going on that you're worried about publishing the thing. And if that's the case, you need to talk to somebody like a friend or a business friend about why you're worried about this piece, because it shouldn't need more than one or two passes for the editing, unless you're writing in an additional language, in which case you'll have tips and tricks from people who have helped you learn your additional language.
Yeah, sometimes it is just I mean, I don't do this with English, but I have been known to do it with other languages, and I do sometimes, and I catch it. Even it doesn't have to be something like very involved, or it could just be an email. Like, but I think it's trying to move away from this behavior because it is not useful. It's not serving any good purpose. Obviously, you want it to be as good as you can, but there's a point where the more time you spend on it, you're not actually improving it. So you're just it does become a waste of time, and that is unhelpful. But yeah, if there is some other reason why you're worried, maybe it's controversial in some way, or maybe you're sharing more about yourself than you have done previously. Like those are not really language issues, are they? They're subject issues. But I don't know if it gets easier with time. I think I would say that there have been a few blog posts in the past that I was more hesitant to post, but that was usually because I was sharing something a bit more personal to make a point. But certainly with other languages, sometimes I spend longer than I should on the editing. But I think it is something to be aware of that, do your best, maybe take a break and come back to it. That helps. But this idea about having it read to you is interesting because I've heard the advice and given the advice that people should read with their own voice. But I guess still your brain might fill in what you think it says, whereas if the computer is reading it aloud to you, there's no influence from your brain to do that. It reads what's there.
The brain is a weird and wonderful thing. Um, if you read it in your own voice from your screen, you will tend to fill in what you meant to type. But if you print it out and you read it as a script, you will tend to see the errors. Um, just ask any academic who's ever given a paper at a conference. We see the errors there. I finally, by the time I finished my academic career, I was taking a pencil up with me so I could circle them as I found them. Because
Interesting.
you're only going to see them in that situation. I did years ago um, talk to a psychiatrist or psychologist, sorry, about this, and he couldn't quite explain it, but he had had the experience too. And actually, I need to go back and see if he's figured out why we do this. But your brain responds differently to paper. If you aren't where you can listen to it be read to you, or where you can't read it out loud, and you just have to do it on the screen, changing the font and the font size to something radically different to what you typed it in to begin with can make it look different enough that you'll catch things. You won't catch as many as you will the other ways, but it's better than reading it in the font and the font size that you started with.
Interesting. Again, I haven't heard this tip and I can't really test whether it works, but for everyone else, the majority of the podcast listeners can. So yeah, that's another tip for you. I know that's not really where we started, but I think it's interesting to get into these things because all of these are tools that will help you to make your writing better and to hopefully to empower you to use your own voice more because it's the only thing that really sets you apart from everyone else that's doing the same thing. And
On the
that,
point of
yeah,
letting go of what you're editing, to very briefly go back to Wordsworth, his first draft was better, or his first published draft was better than
wow,
his last.
okay.
So
He was too
sometimes,
involved.
yes, sometimes it doesn't get better with more editing. It just looks more edited.
And you get more dissatisfied because you like,
Yeah.
yeah.
You're too close and then you start saying everything is bad.
So what about people if they are interested in finding out more about what you do or working with you? What do you, what in which specific ways can you help business owners, freelancers with their writing?
For short form content, I have what is currently on my website called my blogging club. We do a lot of stuff that's not blogging, so it's probably going to be changed to my content club. Um, and that's a monthly membership. There's one workshop a month. The third month of every quarter, that workshop is your individual content planning workshop where we plan your next quarter. The first 2 months of every quarter, the topic of the workshop is guided by the members. Um, the most recent one was on how to write get to know you and behind the scenes style posts. I created some examples and prompts for them, and we've talked through how to use those and how to share stuff that shows your personality without sharing personal stuff that you don't, because the internet doesn't need to know everything about you.
Hmm.
Um, they've been fairly quiet. You may have heard one of the cats meow earlier, but I have two cats. I let them earn their keep. People love pictures of pets. Um,
Absolutely.
and that's a good kind of get to know you post because then I'm not oversharing about my life, but people get to see a bit of it. Um, for the book side, I can take you from the idea that you want to write a book through to publication, either one-to-one or in my group program. So probably best to connect with me on LinkedIn or Substack. I've got 3 Substacks. The one about business writing is called Write Easy, and so you can learn a bit more there.
Okay, and I'll put all of the links to LinkedIn and the Substacks on the show notes page as well, so that you'll be able to find out more there and to connect with Jennifer. So thank you for coming on the podcast again. Thank you for sharing your tips and your experience. And yeah, if people take one thing away from this episode, what do you think it should be?
That it's okay for your first draft to be a mess. Its only job is to be done. Not pretty, just done.
And to be yours.
Yes.
Yeah, to be yours, to use your voice and to yeah, to get it done because it's always and even with stuff that we publish, like I think on the website, it doesn't have to be finished. Okay, an article is different, but if you're thinking about content for your own site, then a website is never done. It's
Oh,
always something that can change.
a recent example of you won't catch all of the things. The the blog post you're going to link to that led to this conversation. I reread it before we met to remind myself what I said, and I found a typo in it. The nice thing about your own blog is whenever you find that typo, you can go in and fix it.
Yeah,
Mm. But you don't need to agonize over it. It's just if you come across it, you can go fix it. But it's been there and it didn't make people think any worse of me. It's just human who typed there instead of veil.
Yep. And then it's gone. And then nobody, had you not told us, nobody would. Okay. So yeah, get the first draft done. Don't leave it as the first draft that never gets published, but also don't feel that you have to constantly be making changes until it's finished, because it's best to be yourself, and that's what will bring people to you.
Yep. And thank you for having me on the show again.
Yeah, thanks again. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the English with Kirsty podcast. If you have any questions or comments, my email address is kirsty@englishwithkirsty.com, or you can go to www.englishwithkirsty.com/podcast, where you'll find information about the individual episodes.